Hello everybody, once again I am Lehman Crafton, aka Zorvalachan, Less Than Guru, and today we are continuing our Torg Eternity setting discussions, and it will be Nile Empire. Now I do want to apologize, yesterday I tried to get out a Living Land video, I had it all recorded, and then I realized that I said something completely wrong, so I decided to redo it. I redid it, I went to upload it to YouTube, and I just kind of set it for automatic. And then I left for the day. Because of the COVID situation, I was not able to get with my parents and my brother's family for Christmas. So we did that over this weekend. And then when I woke up this morning, I realized that it had somehow stopped at 95% uploading. And so I had to re-upload that. So yesterday, I'm sorry you didn't get anything, but today you get two videos. So I want to talk about Nile Empire. But I want to also kind of, since I just did Living Land, I want to kind of do a compare and contrast to it. So in original Torg, as I said before, Living Land was really despised, if not outright hated by players. They felt that it didn't benefit the character at all. So it was, you could have a good character, and I've said I've had an Enos Optant warrior who was an awesome Storm Knight, very powerful, would shock other people on the things that he was able to do and how quickly he could tear through enemies in combat. But the world laws in Torg, in original Torg, you carried with you. And there was nothing that you carried with you as an Enos or somebody from that reality that benefited you. And when you're in that realm, you had to deal with getting lost. You had to deal with losing equipment, at the Game Master's whim. And people just did not like going there. So one of the design philosophies behind Torg Eternity Living Land was we want people to have a reason to be from this realm, this reality, usually through what they introduced as perks. But we also want reasons to go into it, or at least reasons why you just don't find that reality completely annoying. So they did that with the Law of Savagery and the Law of Life. You're more powerful melee. You're not as likely to die if you have to test for death and defeated. So these were things that were good, beneficial, and the bad things like the Law of Decay or cosm cards that you choose to play, and then you choose what you give up. So even if everybody has to give up something, they can choose whatever the least thing that they care about on their character sheet and get a possibility for it. So that's nice. Nile Empire was complete opposite. Everybody loves the Nile Empire of original Torg. When you're looking through it, they have so many things that you can be. You can be a pulp hero, which does a little borderline of almost Silver Age heroes with some of the powers. You can be a spellcaster, and then if you're a spellcaster, you can choose, am I kind of a normal spellcaster? Am I a pulp sorcerer? Am I an Egyptian mathematician or engineer? And the religion, is different. It has different mechanics and miracles. You align planets, which is kind of a new, interesting thing. You can do weird science. You can build gadgets and gizmos. I kind of like flip those. And it could be anything from a ray gun to a version of the Batmobile where you're putting all these weird science stuff onto a car. Things like that. So it basically allowed anything. They even had where they allowed martial arts from Nippon Tech that you could do that. So what Torg Eternity had to do is we want to keep it to where people like it. We don't want to just don't want to use this term nerf because it's not exactly the same system, but we don't want to diminish it so much that people don't want to be in it. And we don't want to just push everything up, but we want to get control. It's not broken, but we want to, kind of file off some of the rough edges and make it like that. So Deanna Gilbert, the main writer and developer for the Nile Empire, really that was what she was going for, was I don't want to mess this up. The history and setting is all awesome. I just have to get the rules into it. So if you watch my Nile Empire original Torg setting review, it's practically the same thing. The history is practically the same thing. They didn't need to do that much changing. The changes were with how certain subsystems within the rules work, the mechanics aspect of it. Now, one thing that they did is they kept Terra part of the Nile Empire, as in axioms and world laws. So they didn't do the slight other shifts that were in original Torg. So the reality of the Nile Empire is the reality of Terra. They didn't split that. And the other thing was when they were going through pulp powers, they tried to stick to pulp powers and cut out those things that kind of borderlined on being overpowered because they were more Silver Age type powers. So you have that type of reigning in the thing. So yes, still people in Torg Eternity are Nile Empire is the best. Nile Empire can do everything any other of the realm can do, but better. But it's not just that on steroids. Basically, it is you can make a Living Land character that works just as well as a Nile character. And since you're not taking your world laws with you anymore, the Living Land person can't take that law of savagery and that law of life when they go into other realms, and the Nile Empire person can't take the law of action and the whatever the in Torg Eternity it's the law of action and the law of heroism into other realms. But when you're there, it affects everybody. So that kind of balanced things out. So I won't get into the settings. What I will say is a few things about the Nile Empire changes. Like I said, with pulp powers, you kind of bring down it into making it pretty much pulp power flavor. There's a few that kind of push that envelope, but it isn't the really big things that were in the original Torg Nile Empire. So then what they did, instead of having a subsystem for every single thing like weird science and a different subsystem for spells, mathematicians, and engineers, and then a different one if you wanted to do pulp sorcery, and a different one for the miracles. Basically, they just all of those the miracles and the mathematician and engineer are based off of the core concept of Torg Eternity. They have their own individual spells that only they can do. Or you can just be a normal sorcerer doing the normal spells that other people do. They do have a thing where the pulp powers give, if you choose a pulp power, it doesn't have to be an innate power. It can be a magic. So you basically have various flavors, I'll say, to what the power is. So you reskin them, basically. If you want something, and the base concept is like, I have a high dex and I want a higher dex, well, the pulp power there is super attribute, which you raise your dex. If you have it at a 10 or higher, you raise it by 1 point. Then you get to decide how that happened. Was it an experiment that happened to me and it's now natural to me, or was I just born with it? So that's a natural innate power. You could say it's part of the gizmo, and I have this super suit that I wear, and it has these little electrodes all over it, and they get my nervous system and muscle system going better, so I'm better dex. You can explain it like that. You can explain it that you were bestowed mystic powers and have a kind of a magic effect. So you can choose how you want the fluff of that power and the mechanics right there. So there's various choices. Like I said, it can be just an innate pulp power you have. It can be a weird science gizmo that you carry around and use. It can be certain things like, say, a heat ray. You could have it and just call it a spell and say it's a magical spell, or you could say some magic being or some deity being instilled that power into me and have it as a magic background. So what I personally have done, and it's not in the book, but what I personally did is I kind of said, you have these three type of things. Is it innate? Is it a weird science gizmo? Or is it some mystically or magically bestowed upon you. And because there are certain things in Torg Eternity that can say only be affected by magic. So if you're like, I'm casting a magic spell, and you're doing the pull power, it affects the thing, but if you had said it's an innate magic or it's a heat ray, then it's not magic. And I didn't want the fluff to be the reason why everybody chose the same thing. So I gave each one of them a benefit. So in my own world, my own house rules, a weird science gadget, somebody else can use. So you can hand it off to somebody else to use. So that's its benefit. Innate magic is you're not going to lose it, and I also have that work in Living Land Wonders. Normally certain pull powers work in Living Land Wonders, so I gave that to the innate magic people, or sorry, the innate pull power people. And then for magic, yes, that can affect whether it's you're saying I'm casting a spell, or you say I was magically given this, I have this magic hammer, or this spiritual hammer, or sword, or whatever, then that affects things that can only be affected by magic. So I kind of gave a different reason, a benefit basically, but I made it so that each one had something that could be useful. So, like I said, even with magic, you can choose to cast spells normally and use the normal Torg rules to cast the spells, or you can pick pull powers and just say those are spells, or you can even mix and match. So that's really useful. The weird science, they have it kind of like Old Torg. Old Torg, you could be a gadget hero, which you weren't necessarily an inventor. You actually might not be a weird scientist. Somebody who was a weird scientist gave you this gadget or gizmo, and or you might have just found it and are using it. So that same aspect can apply. There's a limitation called gadget, means that you could lose it. It might stop functioning, and you can use limitations to kind of boost the power of your pull power. So if it's a gadget, you need 2 minors or 1 major to get the bonus, to give you a limitation to get a bonus. So you get 1 minor limitation if it's a gadget, so then you just have to figure out another minor limitation, and then you get a bonus to that gadget. The other thing they have is they have weird scientist gadgets, gizmos, power upgrades, things like that you can do. And it's not like the original Torg, where you had a worksheet that you figured out and you rolled dice and you did that. Basically, they have perks that you can pick. That one is each act you have to choose different gadgets to carry around. If you want that gadget to carry around, just pick the pull power, give it a limitation of gadget, and you have that. But if you want to use the weird science type gadget power, you have to choose new ones each time. And my personal thing is they have to be new ones until you pretty much have used everything, or it's been a long time since you used it. I do allow the ray to be different. So one act you might have a heat ray, and the next act you have a cold ray, and the next act you have a sonic ray, and the next act, et cetera, just so that you can get some type of weapon if you want to do that. But it requires you to change things. And another one is kind of you're in a situation you can't figure out, and you MacGyver something with weird science to help you against that. It doesn't mean that you succeeded, but it gives you a bonus to whatever it was. And an example I like is, say you're up on a cliff and you need to go down and you have no way to go down. Well, this isn't going to give you a success to go down, but you look around, or you look in your backpack and you notice you have a tent, and you use tent poles, and you rig yourself up this primitive, this hobbled together hang glider. That doesn't automatically get you down, but now it gives you a bonus to your roll. You say your air vehicle roll, so then you can go down, but you have a bonus to it. So there's things like that they have. So and you have to do it differently each time. So it is kind of like MacGyver, It wasn't like every episode he went out and he did the same crazy hobble together something to defeat his problem. He did something different each time. So you have to do something. It's not like, oh, I got through this electric lock. I pick this electric lock. I'm going to do that every time we get to an electric lock. It's like that was for that lock at that time. Figure out something new to do. So that's good for people who are always wanting to change things. Not so good for people who want the constant thing. If they want the constant thing, then just be a gadget hero. Just have that ray gun that you use constantly, that you're not changing things up. But it is a pretty decent system. Before it came out, I had my own system that I published in the Paraverse, and I think the official one is much better. So as soon as that came out and I read it and I figured out what it was, I'm like, okay, for my players, we're going to the new system because it's better. I am in no way, shape, or form too stubborn to admit when somebody's designed something better than me. If I like what I like better, then I'll keep that. If I don't, then I'll move on. So when I update the Paraverse after all the realms realities are released, then I'll just take that out and I might add something else to it. But basically, that's about what I wanted to say with the Nile Empire, is that the big thing in Torg Eternity was keeping it so that people didn't hate it or didn't dislike it, but not having it so that it outshone everything else. So if I talk about the source book, so we talked about the source book here. Now let's talk about the mega adventure, because I told you I'll tell you when I go through the mega adventures if I've game mastered them, how I've changed them, because again, these to me are ideas to mine and even adventures to mine, but not necessarily railroad tracks. You don't necessarily have to go through the whole thing. So in this book, Acts 1 and 2, you can stop right there, and that is a nice little mini adventure, and then you can have the rest of it happen later, and that's actually what I did. I was running my group through Relics of Power Redux, and at Relics of Power Redux, there's certain sections where you gather information, but you don't necessarily know what to do with that information right then and there, so you pass it on, whether you're passing it to the Delphi Council or my Circle of Knights. There's a pass that information along, or spend some time to try to figure it out, or spend some time because you know what to do, but it takes time for that thing to happen, to not get into super details. But there's a point that one of those happened and I needed a little filler, so I put my group into this first 2 acts. And then at the end of the second act that they went through on here, then I went back to Relics of Power. And they or another group can do the remaining 5 acts. You can do stuff like that. Like I said with Godbox, I cut out one of the middle acts, either 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly which one. And I'm going to bring that up possibly in a future session with my group. But you can do that, and the first 2 acts work really well together, and they're supposed to be together, but then there's a cutoff that what happens later isn't completely dependent on that right there. So do stuff like that. Don't think that if you're doing this, that you're stuck with it for 7 acts. You can break it up, and if I don't want to go to those last 5 acts, I never have to go to it, and the first 2 acts were great, self-contained, and the party loved it, and if they don't watch this video, they'll probably never know that there was 5 more acts to this adventure that they didn't go on. So you can always do stuff like that. Be creative, change things, so that even if a group goes through something, you can have another group that will do it differently, or even if you have another group that might have a player or 2 that's the same, that they can go through it and not know everything about it, not just go, oh yeah, at this time this happens, this time this happens. So that's always a thing that you can do. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop that here for Nile Empire of Torg Eternity, how they basically put everything into the perk system, whether it's spells, miracles, pulp powers, weird science. They got rid of all the different subsystems, but the history, the setting, and all that is pretty much spot on for what the original Torg Nile Empire was. So if you like, you can like. If you dislike, you can dislike. If you like this content that I'm doing, please hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends, hey, there's this less than guru person who is on YouTube now. Spread the word. Leave comments. Tell me what you like, what you don't like about these videos. Like I said, I'm just a simple person who's happened to luck into becoming a freelance author for Torg Eternity. I just have decades of game mastering experience and decades of Torg experience, and you can take that how you will, whether you like it or just like what I'm saying. But I appreciate conversations and talking with people and stuff like that. So tomorrow then would be Isle. So until then, I will catch you later.